Good morning and most welcome to age 747. We are presently in the little village of Vårgårda. Those kind people has been so benevolent to us and lent them their big aula for our lecture. And I apologize directly here. I'm a bit tired, but I hopefully will regain momentum during the lecture. Today I will make an anagram of the books of Ian McGilchrist, and I call the lecture, What is the Matter with Things? I try to specify what Ian McGilchrist said. He said, what is the matter with matter? I say, things. And this is trying to characterize and follow a line of thought or a perception of reality that has been going on since ages. And we mentioned it a lot of times before at different formats. We've been speaking about Feyerabend, and he looked at the Greek and their monetary system. Ian McGilchrist mentioned the use of the definite article in Greek, in the Greek language that came to existence somewhere during time, and that led to a reification of certain objects that came to be known as. And the monetary use that became very common in the Greek society that actually covered most of the known world, all the way down to the Red Sea, up the Caspian Sea, beyond the Stoats of Heracles. So it was an immense area they covered. And this is probably something that helped the idea of everything is the same, because the sailors came back and they compared, and as Socrates said, the Greek people are like frogs in a pond. They're all around the pond on the beaches, and so were the Greek, and they compared, and Feyerabend pointed this out. It started with a trade, probably. I would say that it was probably a contributing factor, but the actual start of the whole thing is still unknown. It may never be known why, but it's a unique thing. It's only in Western classical culture this development happened. Similar question has been put in different culture, but it never became a thing to that extent, as it eventually became in Western culture. I'm going to concentrate on some person mentioned by Wittgenstein, and that's Augustinus. And this is inspired by a conversation that my colleague Kalle Lundahl had with some French friends. And there came up the problem of monosemism. And monosemism, I would say, is related to this problem. And this is exactly what Wittgenstein, among other things, wanted to take up in his book, Philosophical Investigations. Well, for that matter, also the Blue Book. And it is a little bit like this. You could say that Augustinus really put that on the paper, that everything is generality, universal, and if you have a singular object, that is actually derived from the universal object. So they made rather a big turn there of things. So it's, I'd say it's very important to realize how big a turn it is. First you have reality, everything is different. Then you get this monetary union, you get all this trade all over the known world, and all of a sudden you start thinking, well, it didn't start with the separate things, it started somewhere else. It started with universals. And there, of course, you have Plato saying everything are ideas in the beginning, and they always existed. So it's impossible for a universal not to have existed. Ponder about that. Yes, it has specific traits. They're not easy to find. And I'd say you need to read Wittgenstein, otherwise it won't come clear to you. That's an absolute necessity. So you could actually exaggerate a bit of a hyperbole here. Like you say, all philosophers and eventually all mankind believed in universals and had this reversed idea of it starts with universals and then it goes down to the singular events. The other trend is something called nominalism. It has been expounded by certain scholastic philosophers, but not fully, not like Wittgenstein, because it's not enough to argue against universalism. That won't cut it, not in this case. You need to disclose universalism. And this is what Wittgenstein does. The argument won't bite on universalism. It's not enough. It could be a good start, but it's not enough. And there are good reasons for that, because we can use universals, and the separate things are actually in a certain way, not of use. How could you use a separate thing in, for instance, what came later, the Industrial Revolution? Can't use it. It never comes to the fore. It never comes up in sight. Because if you have machines, if you have production, everything would be universal. And everything you work with, everything you count with, everything you think with, if you have a cargo ship going to the Indies, you will think in universals. You'll be lost if you start thinking about singular things. You'll be standing there in Calcutta and telling what your cargo is and mentioning all the different objects one by one and describing it to somebody in Calcutta. They won't buy anything from you in the end, because they're going to get tired of you talking for hours, days. Imagine a full ship. And the same goes with money. Do you know which money you had in your wallet last? Do you recognize any coin? Do they have specific traits in the end? No, they disappear. You can ask people, can you describe what a coin is? How does it look? Does it have an edge? What is on the coin? Well, you know it's a king, but that's sort of a general knowledge as well. Have you seen it? How does he look? Well, look at the coin. He looks old now. He is old. Most people don't know that. They haven't looked at the coins since 1975 when he was young, 1976, sorry there, when he was still young, having a voluptuous hair, ondulated, when he was the talk of the town in Stockholm. Those days are gone. He's partly bald these days, even on the coin. Have a look-see. But you see the problem here. We don't use much particulars. There are no use, and in these days I don't even use coin. I use electronic currency. It became very popular here in Sweden, and those are even more general. How do you tell one electronic coin from another one? You don't. And think about the internet. Everything is the same there. And Kalle actually gave me an idea here. Think about the snowflakes. They're all the same. Or are they? No. This thing, you might know, every snowflake is unique. And that's often in the papers. Did you know that snowflakes are all unique? Well, I actually would say something more dramatic. I would say everything is unique. Nothing is the same. And I would say sameness doesn't exist in reality. Those are tough words. That's very, very far from most of mankind have been saying or thinking. And this is called nominalism. This is rather unique, actually. And I'd say Wittgenstein is completely unique. And he doesn't stop by arguing against nominalism. He actually shows the problems with it for the first time. And that's why it's so necessary to read Wittgenstein. Unless you understand what's happening, you won't be able to resist universalism. Doesn't matter how many arguments you have, because you use universalism and you need to use it every day. You should. So obviously you're going to fall for it. Wittgenstein said something completely outrageous. He said universalism is not true. And he got pounded by that. He got attacked from all sides. Only the people who read his book didn't attack him. Well, some of them who read his book even. So that's, I think, is a very important thing to lay down at the start of the lecture. I will talk more in Wittgensteinian terms. I will not make much argument against universalism. I will cut to the chase and I'll go directly to how to actively train away monosemism, how to get rid of it. So you have to agree to get rid of it. Well, otherwise you won't do it. So what are the traits of universalism? Well, everything is more or less the same. It's a broad hand gesture, like you do like this, everything's the same. You clear the table when you have lunch and you just take it away like this, and fruit, it was all the same. Did you like the food? No, it's all the same. I'd say universalism is dependent on intuition. And this is actually the same that Bishop named about mathematics. Because if you are schooled in mathematics, you train your intuition. And that intuition becomes your helping tool by doing math. And if you're not able to train it or develop it, or you have a really bad sense for this sort of intuition, you won't be good at math, at least not the math we're having presently. And that is very similar, very similar. And that is one of the reasons it's so hard to get rid of that intuition, because it comes first. And if you want to do what Bishop recommends, his recipe to cure mathematics is what he calls constructive mathematics. You need to take away your intuition. You can no longer use it. Actually, what he means is no longer use any intuition whatsoever. And you understand the problems here. It's going to be more complicated, much more complicated. It's going to take, at least initially, loads more time. So intuition is also what is happening in universalism. And universalism has a quick, accurate intuitions about the world. They're quick, they're correct, and they are, it should be they here, they are always meaningful. They mean something. They have a meaning. That's the monosemism. And they are, I would say, almost always true. That's could be called logocentrism all the time. And that's important. You need to have a good intuition. There could be people out there who never developed a good intuition for universalism. They will probably not have a work or a specific, they could be artists or musicians or something like that. It could be that. Actors maybe, yeah. But it will be very hard for them to get a regular job. They never developed the intuition. And universalism is incredibly dependent on this intuition. You need to know beforehand what is it about. Let me just give you an example here. That got me thinking. I mentioned Ian McGilchrist's book to somebody who never heard about him. He missed it, and I explained a little bit about the book title and the master and his emissary, and the subtitle being The Making of the New World. And he said almost directly, well, I think what Ian McGilchrist means is he's not too happy with the new world. And that's very sharp. That is sharp intuition. And I was a bit shocked, but that came within a second. And congratulations, or as they say in Greek, bravo, very good. That intuition is universalism. His understanding is very sharp, is very quick. He knows beforehand. And this is, the accurate intuition is true beforehand. He knew even before he read the book what it was about, generally, the general tendency. And this I would call preemptive judgment. And that is dependent on quick and clear intuition. And there you have Kahneman, self number 2, the heuristic, very quick self that makes accurate, very quick judgments. And I say universalism is dependent on this. And this is what makes universalism so true, because we all develop the same intuition, more or less. Whether we are affected by each other, I don't know, but I think so. So there is a general tendency. It's sort of a dance we do together. And I could do that dance with my friend, because I realized it was completely correct what he said. That, I would say, is universalism. And now I sort of gathered the traits of it. It's dependent on a very quick intuition. It's preemptive beforehand, that is, before you even read the book. And when I realized that, many memories plopped to my head about this preemptive. Usually, this preemptive is, when you remember them, is when people say something that's not correct. But some cases, when it's so quick, so correct, you can also remember, like in this case, like with Ian McGilchrist. But I remember somebody who said it was a movie 10 years ago, something, The Bourne Identity. And this person had a very clear intuition that born, that was some sort of verb in English. And I said, no, it isn't. It doesn't mean anything, it's a name. But he was completely sure. And this is also very telling. This intuition is almost every time correct from the point of the person who has it. And this showed he was so convinced it was correct, he wouldn't take no for an answer. I said, well, I studied English, it's not a word. And I got the impression, my intuition said it was a name. I said, no, 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 no. And then we went to see the movie, and he saw it was a name. And then he said afterwards, I know what the movie was going to be about already when I watched it in the beginning. But I was really surprised it wasn't true. So he, in a way, had a very clear picture of what the movie was going to be about, because it's a surprise movie like most movies are today. The idea is you go to the movie, you get completely surprised, and you get happy afterwards. But he said 3/4 of the movie he was a bit bored because he knew where it was going. And then the last 1/4 he got really enthusiastic, because then he got a surprise. So he spent 3/4 of the movie unnecessary, being absolutely clear what it was about. So that's an intuition that I could understand his thinking in a way. But you will ruin the movie if you have this preemptive intuition when you sit down and the movie starts. And you will ruin a book if it comes up. And my friend who had these very good intuitions about Ian McGilchrist is partly ruined the fun of reading the book, because it's very important to get a surprise. That's the idea that Ian McGilchrist wants to make. Do not make preemptive judgments. They can be very helpful in certain cases, but they are not real. What is real then? Well, it's the specificity of the reality. Look at this piece of furniture. You would think it looks like exactly like all the others. They've been manufactured in a factory. And I say there's no chance it's exactly like the others. It has specific traits that no one else has. It's going to be a difference because it's been used as well. But it didn't come out of the factory unique. General, it came out unique. Even at the factories, everything comes out unique. And what we create in this universalism is like a universal world. And that sort of hinders us from seeing reality. So we're not situated in space anymore. And I mentioned yesterday, and I think that was an opening thing, that most people today think, if I take in the surroundings, I'm going to disappear. My borders are going to disappear somehow, and I'm going to float out in this apeiron, as Rosen calls it. That's absolutely not true. It's just exactly the opposite. The more you are in the real place you are, and this is a unique spot. This spot is no like any spot, anywhere. And this is where you are, nowhere else. And universalism puts you in a general scape. We mentioned the coordinate system of Descartes. We mention also object in space in front of subject. Wittgenstein has another take. He says everything is unique. And first he shows that with language. The monosemic tendency is rather, well, I wouldn't say stupid, but because I've been suffering for so many years myself. But once you realize language cannot be any smaller than the world, it's absolutely impossible. How could that happen? I don't know programming. I need to do programming. I don't know how to make cakes, like birthday cakes. So how do I know the word birthday cake? I don't. I can eat one, but I don't know how to make it. I don't know it exactly. And therefore I can't know the exact use of the word. In some cases I will actually make a mistake. Those cases are going to be very few, but it doesn't matter. His point is, language can never be smaller than the world. It's an absurdity. How could it be that? And I'd say universalism is a sort of disease of the mind. And that disease of the mind makes us misuse language. And misusing language will actually destroy you in the end. So this is not a regular philosophical matter. Wittgenstein understands this. Other debates in philosophy could be more pertinent, more with arguments. Is there a meaning to life, such stuff? But in this case, actually, it's more important to getting rid of the tendency, because it's going to affect you negatively. If you don't know language, how can you communicate? And how can you learn anything if you have the idea that language is monosemic? I would say your learning capacity will actually fall quite heavily. You will make the world unknown. And I would say that you take away space in your life. You get compressed. So what should you do to get back to the reality of your actual subjective place, your unique place, which is not general? Doesn't matter what you say, it can never be general. And that is, start with naming all the objects in your close vicinity. And do it in your mind. Don't look at them. Put them all in proper actual relationship. Take the chairs, take the tables, understand the surfaces. Look here, it's a specific surface. This was made to cover up spots. So you can leave some coffee on it and it won't be that visible. And also with the floor. This floor is made so you won't see spots easily. That's why it's this moiré. This is actually fractal. Could be very interesting. You see here already we are getting closer to the world we are in. This is no longer a floor in general. And actually it's quite interesting because they put fractals in the floor. It's not half bad. And now we started to think, yeah, that's rather fantastic. They make floors so you can't see the dirt. So you don't have to clean every day. And then I realized I have that floor at home. But it's so old it doesn't work anymore. It's like 40, 50 years old. And it gets too scrubby, it doesn't do its job well. If you would have a white floor here, every little inkling of dirt would have been shown. And that would be horrible. So we're already starting to get into this reality. We have odd things in the ceiling as well. We have those things that looks like asbestos, but they're not. These are something called stone fiber, and they painted directly on them, which is quite unusual. And it doesn't look half bad. You see what's happening? I'm getting into my unique existence. I'm getting into my specific place in the world. And we can also go to the texture. How does it feel? And what's on the back side? The specific color, you can see the color on this is not completely black either. It has fibers that are of a brighter color. And that makes the color more interesting. It's actually beautiful as well. And it's a broad chair. You see, I'm getting into this picture now. I'm getting into this reality where I'm at. And I have to mention now in parenthesis, I actually been exposed to this of thinking, and I didn't get it at all then. Was a woman in London and she did this, and I thought, she nuts or something? She's talking about, it's a chair, who cares? I actually paid £30 for that lesson. I never got it. It wasn't until I understood the details, because the thing is, I am actually here and nowhere else. And if my body and my mind doesn't understand that, I cannot do accurate perception, accurate thinking, and hey, I can't do accurate things with my body, because my body also has become generalized. And that goes for most people. They don't know how exactly their body look like. They don't know the traits of their body. I know a few things. I have small hands, I have a broken elbow, but apart from that, I don't know the length or the breadth, and therefore I don't knowledge that. My body makes mistake. So this is another take on misuse. This is your lack of knowledge makes you misuse your body. A little bit of this idea actually came from Barbara Conable, but not the whole idea, I would say. Then you put into the context relations. How are things situated in comparison to each other? And I would shut my eyes and I would think for a moment, and let's see if I get an accurate sense of the space where I'm in. Well, half accurate. I missed, we have a really weird ceiling over here that's slanted. I think probably, it's to give more light. No, it wasn't. I don't know why they did that. I thought they put windows up here to give some more light to the, they didn't. You can also name them, give them proper names. This, I think, is called a cathedra. This is it's just a table. You could call it a lecturing table. By giving them specific names, you make them more stick into your head. And there are some languages you always give specific names to the things. You don't have general names like that. And of course, that will help you not to strand in universalism. You will be a generalized person situated nowhere, and you will exactly exhibit those traits that Thomas Nagel criticized in his book, The View from Nowhere. That starts with you yourself. You get universal from how you treat your surrounding, and you start thinking every movement as well is a general movement. This is nothing specific with this movement. It's a generalized trend. And my movements are probably the same as any other's movements. You hear what it's going. It's getting more and more generalized. And this is stress. This is horrible stress. Because your body no longer knows where it is. It needs to know where it is. This idea actually came from our try out with the sitting bull. Because your specific body needs to rest on the sitting bones. Otherwise, it doesn't know where it is. And if you're in your head, you have this idea that you're generally positioned. You put your body into stress, unbalance, lack of coordination, because that information is not from reality. Universalism is not real. And that's the point of Wittgenstein. It's not his argument, he shows it. You need to be shown it. It's not enough in this case to have a theoretical understanding of it. But it's a start, a theoretical understanding. You need to try it out. And indeed, what most people do when they are asked in cognitive tests, they often today give two generalized descriptions of where they are and what they saw. And I mentioned that so many times. They walk into a room, you can take away things when they get back after like 5-10 minutes, and they won't even notice. That means that they are not present. And if you're not present, Wittgenstein showed, you don't know anything about the world. It doesn't matter if it's philosophy, he showed it in the intellectual way. You cannot intellectualize anymore if you don't know where you are. And that's horrible. And actually that's the argument from, for instance, Barbara Tversky, I'd say. If you don't know where you situate, you don't know anything. You are lost. You will be rambling. You will be like Augustine, talking out of his ASS. He did actually say that children learn language by pointing. How could they know what the pointing gesture is? And how could they know what the thing is? And I think that generalized tense he had also show that you make time mistakes. Because eventually the kid will be able to point to a thing and know what a pointing gesture is, and will also know what an object is. But if you universalize time, that gets confused as well. And you see here also I'm pointing to the time aspect. I didn't want to get into time, but maybe it's helpful because this has something to do with ex posteriori and ex anteriori. And generalized people, like myself, because I'm obviously generalized, but that example, he knew directly what Ian McGilchrist's book was about. It's correct, but it won't help him. It would actually make it less interesting, less telling to read the book if you have such a clear and correct perception of the book. So you see here, this intuition you think is so helpful, and it's accurate and it's true. All those things are absolutely right, but it's still no good if you're not a computer. And then we have another trait, and that's the volume. That's especially important when it comes to the body. If we don't know the volume of our own body, if that's not part of our knowledge, we will put the point of gravity wrong. And that's another thing to go about. Easterners very seldom do that. It's usually situated 2 inches below the navel. And here you have your tyngdpunkt, weight point, center of gravity, thanks. The center of gravity is 2 inches below the navel. And if you don't know your volumes, how you are volumized, you will put the center of gravity wrong, because the body map is constructed from your own consciousness. This is the idea from the couple Blakesley. And Cal is interested in that book, so I'll write it up before I forget it. So you can have a look at it. It's spelled this way. I'm not 100% sure, I think so. They show that we make up our own body map and we move ourselves according to that body map. If we have universalism, that body map is going to be incorrect. It's not going to be helpful. It's going to affect your way of moving about. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know anything about my own body. Very little. I'm not standing here like an expert in this scheme. But the body I won't even mention today, because why, God, that's a training thing if there ever was one. And another important thing is something we as modern Westerners ignore, as the primitives don't. We have a really, really bad conception of space, and especially what could be perceived as half-empty space. Primitive people wouldn't do the mistakes I would do. If I make a drawing, I would put almost all the things in this room wrong. Because one other reason is the negative space. I term this negative space like a bit of nothing where the objects are in. And that's a mistake of thinking that comes from universalism. And if I do that, I will not be correctly situated in space. And if I'm not correctly situated in space, my direction will be off. That's also common from Blakesley. And if you have a correct conception, the direction will also be correct. You see here, body map and how you use yourself follow very closely. I didn't realize that really before, I have to admit. We did go through Barbara Conable, and from my point of view, I was rather thinking, this is good knowledge for me, but I didn't think it could be put to accurate news. Not like that. Maybe my mistake is I'm being too interested in everything. But now I realize that's absolutely important, because I'm not a general body. And I even need to know even more specific than she shows in her books. I need to know exactly the length, the breadth, the depth, everything about my body. And if I don't know that, my mind space, my body map will be wrong, and I will be using this in the wrong way. And that point is proven. But if you get the spacing correctly, you know where you're situated. And I only need to return to that to get the situation here. And we normally forget what's behind us. And now I also realize why that is the case. The reason is actually better explained in this way, even if it's a bit not going directly to the point. And that is, if you don't know your space, why think about what's behind you? Because you can't see that. Somewhere we're confusing visual with space, and it's not the same thing at all. Actually, they have very little to do with each other. And Do you understand now why we forget what's behind us? Because we think this is reality, like a TV screen. It all comes together now. There is another point here, and that is in the process of making the object same, universalism, we do something we don't notice. We make ourself the same, the subject. Both parts go together. So if you make the objects more same, we ourselves become more same. And that means that we know less about who we really are. Who am I really? What do I really want? What are my personal traits? What are my emotions now? You see, we lose, this is the transcendental tendency. We lose the contact with the body. This is what Richard Link was pointing to as well. The loss of bodily sense and the split between the body and mind. Put in Wittgensteinian terms today, you are a unique person, and I don't mean that as an encouragement speech, I mean that as plain fact. And if you don't get into that unique position, or you use something completely different for your body map, for your mind map, that is bound to cause problems, practical problems. So many people say that Wittgenstein doesn't make interesting philosophical points. It could be true, but he does do points that are very, very important for your mental and bodily health. And that could possibly be much more important if you understand that you are a living person in this body right now at this place. But my point was, in the beginning, think about the walls, how they are constructed, what color they have, what sort of surface they have, and then in the end it will be easier to even understand more or less completely empty space, like snowy landscape. We don't see features. And I have to admit, when I saw the snow today, in a certain sense I don't like it because everything looks the same. And then I don't feel I'm orientated. And I think that could be helped. You can see shapes in snow as well. And as I mentioned before, every snowflake is unique. Everything in the world is unique. And every plane with snow, even if it looks completely the same, it's not the same, trust me. Because you are standing in a specific position, you're looking in a specific way, and your whole body is situated in a specific way. And that's bound to make even that completely white, flat surface a character, almost a name. So the devil is in the details, and much of this idea also came from the descriptions of these primitive people who name everything around them, that have names for everything. They also have stories about them. So if you point to a specific plant, the word will tell you what's the name, what's its use, but also a story. Maybe that plant is participating in a tale or a myth or something like that, or something he remembers that his uncle told him when he was 2. You see, that connects us to the world, and this sounds a little bit like connectivism, as I mentioned before. And here we get a recipe for getting into connectivism, to getting into knowledge. And this will actually heal the monosemic tendency. Because if you take in everything, you will more and more understand that words are used. It will not be an empty slogan, which was never meant from Wittgenstein's side. He doesn't repeat it that much, actually. I heard it to death when I studied philosophy, therefore I never understood it. It just became slogan. I said it like a couple of times. And in the beginning you try to look pretentious when you say it. Well, you know, words are use. I had no idea what I was talking about. And this, you understand now why it's so important to read philosophical investigations, maybe the Blue Book, maybe the Brown Book. It needs to be trained, these things. And you don't get correct, because you just get more and more into it. That's what, there's no correct view here. It's a betterment. It's a progressive. And I would say this will, in the end, shed some polysemic light into the Platonic darkened cave. And I would say that Platonic cave is a real hellhole. There's no air there. There's no breathing space. There's no place for knowledge in the Platonic reality. And I think that's maybe the argument that really struck to my heart from Wittgenstein. You will get no knowledge if you hack onto universalism. It's a practical tool to make machines, to have an economy and those things, but they're not reality. And if you confuse it with reality, you'll be completely lost. And maybe you understand more what he says when he says to help the fly out of the bottle. What he also means, if the fly stay in the bottle, it will die. And that meaning was intended from Wittgenstein. You will not survive in universalism. Your body will crack, your mind will crack, and nothing will work for you, because there is no universal reality. Not even in science fiction could there be one such a thing. It could never be, because you can't even imagine. This is an illusion from the things we do. And the more you learn to do things, the more you will realize this. This is a progression scale. There's no end point. You can't say, now I come to definite understanding of the world. I'm going to put myself into the grave. That is just pure nonsense. It doesn't have any truth to it. It's complete misunderstanding of language. So the path out of the cave is a bit more putting light into the cave in the beginning and seeing the walls of the cave. Here it comes quite literal. It's a good start. And this is something you can train. Your brain is not sterilized, it's not finished, it's plastic. And you can get out of that thinking little by little. Don't do it all at once. And in the end, you will see that words are beautiful. They are fantastic. And they have their meaning thanks to they have so many different meanings. They have an infinity of meanings. Like you can use a piece of paper in an infinite way. And this is what makes a paper a paper. It wouldn't be paper if it only had one use. Such objects don't exist. But very few anyway, if they do exist. I really doubt it. Paper could be underneath, could be a cushion. I can make an airplane with it. I can do loads of things. And this is what makes something real. Anything monosemic is unreal. And you are the one who's saying the unreal things, not anyone else. You are the one who's suffering from this. So there is a way, there is a hope. Well, I think I better end there. And I think it's time to say good afternoon almost, but it's not. I have to say good morning, and thank you very much.
Thank you.